Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to make some custom clothing and I'm going to style this little BJD doll. This is like one of those really cheap, very hollow plastic bodied ones, but it has a really lovely face and the hair actually has different tones of pink. So it is actually quite a beautiful mold and it's really articulated. I wanted to start off with the clothing and I already made a tape pattern. This was basically just made by wrapping some cling film around the doll and then taping all of her body features with thinner strips of tape to make sure I get all the details of the shape a little bit more. And then I drew on a little pattern and cut the pieces apart. And this is basically part of the shirt. I wanted to give her this Gothic Lolita style, so I went on Pinterest, made a little mood board, got some ideas, and then I just went into my fabric stash and I searched for some fabric. This is actually the same fabric that I used for the medieval type doll, where I made the skirt out of this. So it's very light and it actually was a blouse to begin with, so making a blouse out of a blouse is kind of ideal. And this is a very, very thin fabric, which means that hopefully on the doll it also will look very nice and fitting size-wise, since when you scale things down, stiffer fabric won't look that well on the dolls most of the times. But yeah, I'm just tracing everything, making sure that I leave enough outer perimeter when I cut the fabric, because I know that this frays. So I'm going to later secure it with some glue and some fray check and things like that. But for now, the first thing is cutting it out. And then I'm starting out by basically sewing the back and front pieces together, but leaving out the side seams underneath the armholes. It was really hard to film this because it's really hard to see what I'm doing. But basically I'm sewing everything up on the shoulder pieces, and then once I have the shoulders finished, I'm going to attach the sleeves into the armholes without the lower seam being sewn. If you do it that way, basically you can sew the entire seam for the sleeve and for the body, the side seam in one go. And I also do this when I make clothes for myself most of the time, because it means that the sleeve will lay flat and you don't have any wrinkling after, because you have to match the size of the armhole and the sleeve or things like that. I just think it looks way more even. You can see how I have attached the sleeve on one side and still have the armhole open. And I'm actually going from the underside where the armpit will be all the way down the body and then sewing the sleeve. And this just means if you sew it all in one go from the tip of the sleeve downwards, the layers can shift. If you start underneath the armhole and then just go both directions, it mostly means that at least the seam on the armpit will line up pretty well and look actually pretty nice. And you can see I'm painfully slowly hand sewing all of this. This took actually, even though the video is pretty sped up, about 2 hours to sew the shirt, just to get it to a state where the doll can wear it. The sleeves are at pretty much fitting, but I know they will be pretty tight. I'm just trying to make them so I don't have to pull out the hands of the doll, because I know it's actually really, really hard with these and I don't want to break the pegs. But you can see here the length matches pretty well. I didn't cut the front panel out at first, so I'm just doing that later. I just wanted to have a bit more fabric to grab onto while I'm sewing, because again this fabric is very thin and it's shifting a great lot. I also am not gonna sew together the back. That's why there's a huge open slit, because I want to make this removable, and for that I'm going to use some Velcro that I'm going to sew on. And also this glue, this Uhu glue, is all-purpose glue, and it's I think it's epoxy based if I remember correctly, but I found that it works pretty well for all kinds of doll clothes to hem. This trick was actually found by another YouTuber I watch. But yeah, I've used it a lot of times and it works really well. For this fabric, it darkens it a tiny bit, which means I have to be very careful when I'm like securing the seams. Like you can see, I already like made the base shape of the collar here by gluing it down, and I already turned over and hemmed with the glue the armhole just so nothing would fray while I sew the other side. And then once I have the other side sewn, I need to pin the back to make sure that that sits right, because again I need to like leave it open for the Velcro, but I want to like close up the front completely. So for that the back already needs to sit really well, and since I have a lot of excess fabric there, because you know the Velcro needs to have a lot of fabric to attach to so it overlaps, it means just pinning it is the easiest way. And then again, I'm going in with glue and hemming the seam. I'm going for, yeah, this like blouse, like buttoned blouse look, but without buttons. So I'm like mainly trying to get the shape of like the basic like part where the buttons would be right. And I'm going to add a collar in a bit, but I just want it to look like, you know, it's buttoned together but without adding buttons. I'm going to add in some frill details on top, so those would hide the buttons IRL anyways. But yeah, I'm just trying to, as you can see, like make it overlap but also make it look very decent, because if you fold the fabric over, since it's so like translucent, you can see like every fold over, so I don't want to have too much excess on both sides when I fold like the middles over, so that it doesn't look bad. And then once I've glued it, I'm going to trim like the neckline before starting on all of the decorations. I got some glue around like the right armhole side. You can see it like kind of change the color a bit, but it's not too visible, especially with her hair on top, so I didn't bother, because you cannot really fix it anyway, so it was totally fine. Next up, it was time for the collar, and I just basically glued like a thicker strip of the fabric over on top of itself, leaving like a little bit on the bottom of like the like single layer fabric, and that I'm going to use to glue this on. And then I'm going to like fold it over a bit, and the glue will like stiffen the fabric. So if I fold it over and crease it, it kind of acts like a bit like when you fold paper, and it will hold the shape, which should hopefully give us a really nice color in the end. And yeah, I'm trying to like make the attachment like as thin and as sturdy as possible, because again you can kind of see it, and the thinner I make it, the more likely it is that the color will like completely cover it. And here you can see me fold it, and you can see it holds the shape pretty well. But then I also wanted to add some details like on the chest area, because a lot of these like Gothic Lolita style clothings, they have ruffles in the middle of the shirt or like along the button line. So I wanted to make that. So I'm just grabbing some of the strings off the fabric. Luckily this fabric actually pulls really easily, so you can just actually use its own like fibers, and then I'm just ruffling it in like 2 strips basically to make the ruffles even before securing everything with glue. And then I'm just trimming the excess in like a half rounded shape. I don't want the ruffles to go all the way down, because I fear that they may be too bulky when I add the like skirt and the more like corset-esque like decor, because I already know that that will have a lot of volume. And then I'm actually cutting the ruffles in the middle. And now remember, these are glued completely, so I'm not like worried about the ruffles like opening up, but I'm cutting them like a bit thinner on the one side so it doesn't look weird, because technically like when you like make the shirt, the ruffles would like disappear just a tiny bit. Also apparently in this case I actually changed my mind, and I'm going to go with the ruffles all the way down. I couldn't remember anymore because it was a while back, but like I had 2 options, and in my mock-up that I have right now it's like only like a half circle where the ruffles are, but I guess I deemed the fabric thin enough for it to work with the shirt. I just couldn't remember because like the skirt is actually covering that part. So even looking at the doll right now, I cannot tell that the ruffles go all the way, but you know, I guess they go, and that means that like in the future when I want to change the skirt up or take up like the corset-esque thing, it will like actually have details all the way down and not look weird. I also used the same method to make some ruffles for the sleeves, because I found that it just looks way nicer to have a lot of like ruffle details in these kind of clothes. And since I'm planning on not adding like a jacket or something, the like, you know, upper layer basically of this will be like fully visible. So any detail, anything I can add on the sleeves, on the collar, and like front, like with the ruffles, will be like the main focus of this blouse. Now, I also wanted to add like a little bow tie thing on like the neck part where the collar meets. First of all, to hide the collar line a bit more, like especially in the front, but also because I like all the bow details that like a lot of these Gothic Lolita clothes have. So of course adding these kind of ribbons was more than fitting. I'm just using glue to make them and like looping the two pieces of like the strip over, and then I'm making sure to like secure it in the middle. It's really hard to describe, but yeah, basically it's just like a tiny strip of the ribbon in the middle that I'm wrapping around and then gluing flat. Like I'm not purposefully not making a bow with like making any knots, because I know again they will not lay that flat, especially on this like smaller scale. So just purely tacking it down with glue and or sewing it down, you can totally sew this, will help best. Next up, I'm adding the Velcro to the back, and for that I actually left enough excess fabric to where I can have like a double layer. I'm starting off with glue, but I'm also like off camera going to sew around the edges just a tiny bit. I'm also adding like a tiny piece of Velcro on the collar just to make it sit better. The Velcro is quite chunky, so since I know that the hair will like hide it, I'm not too worried. You can see here like I'm adding like this tiny piece of Velcro on both sides. And just to make sure that the collar can be put like a bit more tightly around the neck and it's not too loose, because it's always really hard to like have the collar attached with like the rest of the Velcro, because it may like pull the shape a bit weirder and it may not sit as tight around the neck. And having it separately with either like a piece of Velcro or a button or something will just make it a bit better looking, in my opinion at least. For the skirt, I went to many iterations. This is actually the second one. This is where I tried to like make a circle skirt that fits her and then add like the petticoat ruffles underneath by directly gluing it to them. Then I had another one where I tried something different with this like edge detailing. This is just some lace that's embroidered, and that didn't work either. And then in the end I ended up with this version where I'm adding like these tiny little press buttons. These are actually really easy to sew in, and a lot of my like older Barbie doll clothing actually came with those. So they work really well since they grab pretty well, but they don't grab too much to where I have to fear that the thinner fabric like breaks or like rips or something, and you can like kind of grab into them and like pull them apart, and they also lay decently flat enough. So perfect for this petticoat. And then for the top skirt, I want to go a bit fancy and add some ruffles. I like try to just make a circle skirt and have it lay flat. This fabric isn't that thick, but it's definitely a bit too stiff. But I really like the pattern and the color of it, so I wanted to go with it. But yeah, basically what I'm doing here again is secure the edges just with some glue, and then I'm like cutting the hole for the body, and I'm going to hem it with a bit more of this like ribbon and just some glue to make it like a little bit more sturdy, and like so I can actually attach things onto it without having to worry that it pulls weirdly. This fabric frays quite a lot also, but adding like the glue and then the little ribbon detail on top will prevent that. and it kind of looks like weirdly cone shaped right now, but I'm going to fix that by ruffling it in a lot of spots. And I just hope that like the ruffles add a nice bit of texture, and that's also why I in the end went with like a black tone for the petticoat instead of the original blouse fabric, just because I knew the skirt would like not fully cover this. Here you can see I'm like gluing and sewing on the entire waistband. This is just, again, making it sit a bit more flat, adding rigidity, and then in the end, like the back, I'm going to have to put some Velcro on. The shape of the doll is very like thick towards the back, so I know if I like sew part of the back open and just add a button or something as a closure, like it's not gonna keep its shape as nicely, so I decided some stiffer Velcro, like the stuff I used for the top, would probably work way better. I'm still going to add like a button on the waistline just to like make it fit around there, but yeah, the Velcro is just a bit more adjustable, so I can like shape the skirt a little bit more with it while it's on the doll. Next up, it was actually time for the ruffles, and these I also sewed by hand. I made like some tiny running stitches, and I went back and forth between the fabric. Like I actually made like 2 rows each time to make sure that it sits really nicely, because again, if you have like one running stitch for a ruffle, it like pulls kind of unevenly on both sides. If you make 2 like kind of really close together parallel, it just sits a bit better. I started out with only a few, but then in the middle I tested out if I added some more, because it, like, as you can see, it like bulges out quite a lot, and I really didn't like that look. So you can see I added a little bit more of these stitches in the middle, and it kind of helped. So like my goal is to do that all the way around and have the skirt like not bulge out as weirdly, and just sit like a bit more flat. And then sadly my camera died, and I didn't notice. I like tap on the cable and I pulled apart the connection. So yeah, basically it didn't record the entire time where I made this like waistband, but all it is like a straight waistband with some Velcro on the back that I then made some like of these loops for. These are just some O-rings for like jewelry making, and I added the ribbon to make like a little loop so I can attach them, and then I added some more ribbon on the side and like glued it underneath, and this hopefully should mimic at least a little bit of corsetry. I actually wanted them to be like accent and not functional loops, so they are a bit larger, but I think they look really nice. Could have gone with some smaller ones, but when I held them onto it, like first of all the ribbon wouldn't sit as nicely, because although it's already some pretty small ribbon, like I would have had to use a bit smaller. But yeah, in this case, I think the larger loops actually, you know, they had some way more interesting details. And I only managed to fit 2 because the rest would be covered by the skirt and would like change the shape of it. But yeah, next up was the shoes and the socks. For the shoes, as you could see, I actually used the original ones. They were like really soft, like almost rubbery plastic, so I could cut like the opening like nice and easily with my scissors. And then I painted them black, and I wanted to make them look like lacquer shoes. So I just painted them with some really glossy black nail polish, and as you can see, they definitely look like lacquer shoes. They do look a bit plain, so I decided once I sewn the socks, which for these I actually used the like fabric in the beginning, and I didn't want to add like anything else. They sit pretty loosely, but they definitely hold their shape well. I just wanted to have like the same color matching for the top, just to make sure that like it looks a bit more cohesive. And like in any other case, I would have probably grabbed some patterned stockings or something, like some really thin ones from my stash, and like actually use like stockings for making these. But I wanted to have these like loosely fitting, like kind of cutesy socks again that match like the original like top I made. And then I decided to do all the lacing and ribbon details. So for the lace, I just like glued it on top, and then I made some like tiny ribbon, just the loop part, not like the side bits that would hang down, because those were like already covered by me gluing together the ends of like the part that is laced up. And then I wanted to add some ribbons, but I wanted to make sure she still fits into the shoe, so I just made some tiny rings actually around the socks. And these I can remove anytime, they just make it look like they are attached to the shoes. Next up, it was time to style the hair, and for this I really liked the hair. I knew it was like very cheap plastic hair, so I knew I couldn't like add stiff details, but I started off by like wet combing and trimming it, and then while I waited for it to dry, I wanted to make a headband. So I grabbed a piece of wire, glued a ribbon on from both sides, and then I made like a tiny ruffle with the original fabric, and then I actually used the skirt fabric to make like a broader ribbon to glue that on top, and this should mimic like these ruffled like headbands like quite a bit, hopefully. And yeah, you can see like it's fastened with just some more glue and then some more of these ribbons that I made. Like I made quite a bit of ribbons to decorate this piece. I just think they add a little more details, especially around the edges, and they look quite cute. Even though they are like dark tones, so they blend in a little bit, but just a little bit more texture and things like that I think looks really nice. Once the hair was dry, I wanted to try and curl it, and I knew like that even, because I tested it, like even hotter water while I was washing it started like melting the hair, and that's just tap water heat. So I decided to use a hair dryer, like a blow dryer, but instead like mine has a bit too much like air volume flow, so I decided to go with my heat gun. And this heat gun is not set that high. It just set like at a medium height, like I can totally hold it still. Like I found any like warmth that is not uncomfortable for the hands is like the most I can go with. But I first wanted to try and like use like a stick to wrap it around to make the curls, and that didn't work at all. So I went through and did these these are not braids, these are like twisted braids. So they're not like the classic like 3-strand braids. But hopefully these will give it some nice twist and waves. At this point I actually tried multiple things. Like I tried like drying them after I made them wet with the hot air gun, just to have it keep the shape. And as you can see, like the hair doesn't look different from the beginning. So I decided, you know, I probably can only make like some slight waves. So that is why I like made these braids, then wet the hair, and then completely dried them again with this heat gun, just making sure it's not too hot. And then I combed them out slightly, and it left these like very voluminous, like wavy hair, and not as curly. Like I really wanted to have some nice luscious locks, but definitely adding like a lot more volume, and I think it actually is fitting and looks really nice. But yeah, the reason why I didn't wanna attach like different new doll hair again, I mentioned in the beginning, like the pink hair she had actually had like tiny strands of like darker and lighter pinks, and it looks super pretty. I do have some doll hair that I could have used for re-rooting hair that has like a similar color, but it's like one color, and this has like this nice variation, so I just kept it. The upper layer of her head, like it doesn't have that much rooting, so I actually made like a little ponytail like thing on the top, just with like the like covering hair to make sure that that's not interfering with anything. And then I left 2 strands like on the front as like loose hair, just to give it more volume, and she had these 2 strands loose before, so it makes sense from the rooting to just pick them out again and add a slight bit more waves, and then, you know, attach them. Also having the like surface bun, so to speak, in the head like hair will also hold down the headband pretty nicely. And lastly, I added these like foam inserts into the heels, kind of like you would do with IRL shoes too, because she was slipping out of them a little bit too much. And with that, the doll is finally finished. I know this video had a lot of quick succession things, but this doll honestly took me over 9 hours of straight work to make, even though she's so small, like just the clothes. And then I didn't actually time how long it took me for the hair, but yeah, I think she turned out really, really lovely. As you can tell, the video is definitely like way longer than what I normally make, but I didn't want to split it up because, you know, it was kind of like working on all pieces like kind of at the same time. So if I would have split it up, I think there would have been like not really a good point to split it. So here you guys getting an extra length video. And overall, again, I'm super, super happy with how she looks. I think the clothes fit her super well. I think I matched the style pretty well with this like Gothic Lolita-esque vibe. And again, it's like really hard to manipulate fabric in a way that actually looks really nice and detailed on the small scale, because just everything, like every tiny ruffle, every tiny detail you add looks like still enormous, like in comparison to these really small dolls. But overall, I think it just looks super lovely with all the added ruffles, the bows, the lace-up detail. And the skirt and the like corset are separate, just so I can like pull them on and off easier. Plus any other seam lines would have like added volume in places I didn't want to, so this works out pretty well. Either way, let me know in the comments down below what you think of these little dolls' clothing, and as always, I hope you have a great day. See you next time. Bye bye!